you need this many teachers per kids, you need this many staff members per kids. So I would say they start there and then work their way out. And especially, so the reason that there is such an uproar in Raleigh County is because they are proposing so many cuts. So at this point, they're proposing 78 professional personnel, and that's your teachers, that's your counselors, that's, administration. We don't know exactly who all those people are, but 78 is a huge number.
Welcome to Creepalachia. Class is in session today. Jozy's out of quarantine.
Finally.
Finally. How you feeling?
Stuffed up.
Little stuffed up. We're making it.
Yep.
But we're gonna talk some education in West Virginia, mainly Raleigh County, but also it's happening in every county. You wrote an amazing article. Thank you for letting us put it on the website. If you haven't read it yet, I will link it below. But basically, I'm going to play the dummy as usual, lay this thing out and then I'll be the person that gets mad and wants to throw chairs and, not really know anything. So what's going on that caused an uproar this year in the education system? So
right now, every school district in West Virginia is going through a process called RIF and transfer. RIF, RIF, stands for reductions in force, which are, layoffs, cuts, however you want to say them. And essentially what it's all based on is the state has given these school districts the amount of funding that they're going to receive for the coming school year. And they've also told them, based on the funding that we're giving you, this is how many teachers you can fund, this is how many staff members you can fund, and based on your current numbers, this is how many, essentially, people that you're going to have to find a way to fund on your own. They'd be, say, over formula is what they're called. This is how many staffing members are over formula. So based on those numbers, the district then has to say, okay, we know how much money we're getting. We know how much staff we can fund. How do we make up the difference? And typically what happens is, to make up the difference, they cut personnel. So that's what's happening right now is the school districts are deciding, they've already decided who they could potentially cut. And now the Board of Education is having to decide, do we accept these recommendations or do we maybe think of another way?
Right. And obviously it sucks. People don't like getting fired, especially when it comes to, people who are watching your kids, helping them grow, help them learn. So people obviously got very upset over this. So, how did they start? How did they decide what cuts were made? Like, how do you say, well, we don't really need that guy who's cutting grass or, whatever. Like, how do they make choices?
Well, I think so. I'm not 100% clear of how they decide, but a lot of the stuff is state dictated. So, it says this is how many, you need this many teachers per kids, you need this many staff members per kids. So I would say they start there and then work their way out. And especially, so the reason that there is such an uproar in Raleigh County is because they are proposing so many cuts. So at this point, they're proposing 78 professional personnel, and that's your teachers, that's your counselors, that's, administration. We don't know exactly who all those people are, but 78 is a huge number.
Did they go by seniority or?
So yeah, a lot of it is based on seniority. So that's how it starts is once they identify, say, maybe they have 8 fifth grade teachers and they need to cut back to 5. They would then determine, okay, who are the 5, fifth grade teachers that have the most seniority, and then work out from there. Well, that's not a good example because teachers are different because obviously, there's a lot of elementary teachers can cover multiple grades and things like that. So that's not a great example. I'd say counselors are a better example because there's less lateral movement that can happen with that position as opposed to teachers. So as of now, we do know that there's 13 counselor positions that are being proposed cut. And That's out of like 32. So the math, what is that?
Oh, I'm not mathing anything this evening.
I know, but like,
because you know how many math teachers are listening. Like, I'm
Right.
going to hear what they saying.
So essentially, the two-thirds of the counselors that are remaining have the highest seniority. The 13 that are being cut have the lowest seniority. So
Gotcha.
that's how that works. And again, that's a state dictated process that you go by seniority.
Gotcha. And it's union. So is that part of that too? Like with the teachers union, how does that work?
So when it comes to the union, I don't think they can play a part and say you can or can't cut this person. Where it comes into play, I think, is when it comes to the hearings that teachers can have, essentially to appeal the decision that's being proposed. They can have some representation there, and there has been some representation for teachers who have had hearings before the board to say, you shouldn't cut me, you shouldn't cut this position. They've been able to have attorneys represent them.
Gotcha. Has there been any, the word strike been floated around or anything like that? I mean, I don't guess there's really anything much you can do about it, but,
No, I mean, so like, obviously, like, I'm very much ingrained into what's happening in Raleigh County. I don't know what the other states are or what the other school districts are proposing. I'm not sure of the rules for striking. I don't think,
because in the coal mines, like used to, if like you didn't like the taste of the water, you just pour that stuff out and walk outside, and everyone just goes and deer hunts. So
honestly, I
can't do that anymore.
It's not something that's ever been talked about, but potentially, like, if there were statewide a bunch of cuts being proposed, I guess they could band together. But at this point, I haven't heard anything about that.
Gotcha. And the one thing, what concerns me is when this always happens, and I haven't dove too much into it, but they always go for the arts and culture teachers, and they always go for, things that I feel are dire for mental health, which are guidance counselors. And I heard that there were teachers, they were doing two things. They were cutting people off and also moving people to other schools.
Right.
And some of them were there at schools, I think up to 10 years is what I heard at one school that got moved.
So for a specific example, there's a teacher at Independence Middle School. His name is Marvin Jarrell, and he teaches the advanced studies classes. He teaches some other classes as well, but that's mainly what was being talked about at the board meeting. So he has over a decade of experience. He is the most senior teacher in the system for advanced studies in Raleigh County. So what's being proposed for him is they're going to cut the program at Independence Middle School of the advanced studies program. And so currently in the district, there are 6 advanced studies teachers, but there's 7 positions. So one of them is vacant. Of those positions, I think 2 of them are like in the school system permanently, like Mr. Gerald's. He's at Independence Middle. He stays there. He doesn't go anywhere else. There's, I think, at least 4 that they have multiple schools. So they rotate around to the different schools to teach the advanced studies classes. So what's being proposed for that program is they're going to decrease the number of teachers from 7 to 4 for advanced studies. And then all of those teachers are going to rotate between different schools. So that's what really caused the uproar of Mr. Gerald's students, because he's no longer going to be like a permanent fixture at Independence Middle. He doesn't even know at this point if he's going to be teaching there, even on like a rotating basis. So that's one of the major changes that's coming. But I will say with that, when you talk about, the arts getting cut and different things getting cut. So one of the things that was mentioned in Mr. Gerald's hearing, because he had a hearing, I believe last week, he had a hearing for the board to talk about his position and, why he thought it should remain the same and not get changed. One of the things that was stated by, I think, the attorney for the school board was that only one of the 7 positions for advanced studies is actually funded by the state. So those remaining 6 positions, the school board pays for them out of their own funds that they accumulate. So, if you think about that, technically the state has already said you have too many advanced studies teachers. We're only funding 1. So I think that's where, when it comes to when the school district is getting even more or even less funding from the state, they're like, well, we have so many of these positions, only this many are funded. That's when they start looking at those kind of programs. And I think that can probably be said for maybe some of the other arts programs, is that they were out of formula. And so that's why they're being cut.
Got it. And while we're at it, let's kind of lay some things out there that maybe people have been too shy to ask. And I'm just going to ask them because I'm a dummy. But where does school funding come from? So comes from a few different pots, right?
Right.
So, the tickets they sell at a football not necessarily, like ticket sales for football game, they probably go to that particular school.
Yeah.
But like as far as the board's funding, where does it come from?
Overall, there's like 2 main sources: state funding and federal funding. And it's not like the state says, here's $30 million, figure out what you want to do with it. It's, here's this money and here's A, B, and C. Here's what you have to do with the money. So, and the same thing with like federal aid, school systems will get funding for the lunch programs. They'll get funding for specific teachers or, specific aides, things like that. So that's where the bulk of their money comes from. Raleigh County also has a school levy that is passed by the voters of this county. They actually just renewed it. It was passed, I think, in the 2024 primary election. It was passed. So that's another source of funding. And that's paid for, obviously, by the local taxpayers. And so, however, again, it's not like, so there's a levy, and I forget the amount, but it's a significant amount, but it has to be used for specific things. So in the levy, it states like so much money is used for teachers, so much money is used for curriculum, so much money is used for
vapes.
No.
Maybe not. Okay, probably not vapes, but
maybe like anti-vaping programs.
Yeah.
But again, it's like very specific, because that was one of the things that was brought up at the board meeting, was like, well, we have a levy. Instead of cutting these teachers, why don't we use that money to pay these teachers? And it's, well, technically the levy is probably already going towards paying teachers. And without it, we'd probably see a lot more drastic cuts. But again, they can't just reallocate levy funds to pay for teachers, because there's only a set amount they can use.
Okay.
So,
so a levy, like we hear that word all the time. It's basically something that the voters can vote on, and the money comes from the taxpayer of that county.
Right. It's based on like your property taxes. So it's the
certain percentage, or
yeah, that gets added on. It's very like we have a couple levies. So like in Raleigh County, we have a fire levy, and that helps pay for all the volunteer fire departments in Raleigh County that don't get, like the Beckley Fire Department gets funded by the city of Beckley, but like the volunteer fire department in Beaver, they rely on a levy to be able to fund their department, to be able to respond to calls. So the same thing with the schools. They rely on that levy to pay for additional costs that are outside of the state formula.
Got it. Okay. So there's where so where does the tax money come from for the regular budget from the county? Isn't it like, I can't remember. Does B&O tax go toward school funds, or? There's
a certain percentage of the tax funding that comes out of Raleigh County that gets distributed to the schools.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the percentages.
Which gives them the budget.
Right.
So they have this total budget that they're working on, and they got notified that they had to make X amount of cuts from the state. Right.
So that is one thing I missed. So like in addition to state funding, federal funding, levy, there is obviously other taxpayer dollars that they get that gets funneled into their overall budget. But yeah, the state, that's where the majority of these cuts are coming from, is because, and let me get the exact number. So let me just like back up and like go through the process a little bit.
Sure.
So what happens is at the beginning of the year, in the second month, so it was October, second month of the school year, the state says, okay, you need to turn in your staffing numbers and you need to turn in your enrollment numbers. So that gets submitted to the state in like October. And then I'm not sure when they give the information back to the districts, but they come back to the districts and say, okay, based on your enrollment, here's how much money we're going to give you. And the state aid formula. It's really confusing. It's based on enrollment, but it allocates fund based on, what they've decided, what the state has decided is the base salary for teachers. Like the population density comes into play. There's a bunch of things that come into play when it goes into that, but it all goes back to enrollment. Mm-hmm. So essentially, like a really simple way to say it is like, if you have 100 kids, they say, okay, like you get $1 a kid, you get $100. You lose 20 kids. Okay, well now you get $80. And from there you have to say, okay, well now we have $20 less. We have to figure out how do we change our staffing to accommodate the less funding.
So you fire a large marge in the cafeteria and
unfortunately, yeah. It sounds like it's such a like a strict process for like something that's affects people so deeply.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're talking about a formula that decides how much money a county is going to get. And from there, they have to lay off teachers that work for the school district that have maybe seen these kids for a year, so it's a very like formal way of dealing with such like a personal thing.
Yeah. It's very depressing. And everyone, I'm making jokes, okay? I'm sorry if you get offended, but that's just what's going to happen because it's depressing enough to think about, well, there's going to be less people teaching my kid how to do stuff.
Yeah,
so.
But I wanted to get to when Raleigh County specifically, when they gave their numbers to when they gave them to the state, they were told that they were over formula by like 78 professional personnel, which is like your teachers. And then they were told they were over formula.
It sounds very robotic though, because every county has different issues.
Right.
That need addressed that may require more people. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just like one kid is one person. Like some kids require, the level of 3 people.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's what I hate about this.
Right. But like the education, like public education in West Virginia is very much controlled by the state. There's policies for everything. And I mean, I think it's very apparent Raleigh County, they were told they were over the state aid formula by 79.27 professional personnel. What is 0.27 of a person?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can't fire a quarter of a person.
Well, they're literally using a calculator.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then for service personnel, they were told they were over 76.61 service personnel. So, that's where all these cuts are coming from, is the state saying, here's your funding. You're over by this many. Essentially, go figure it out. So that's what got us to where we are now. And that's why we have 78 professional personnel that are being considered for reduced.
So that's one reason that funding is being depleted is people are moving to Charlotte pretty much and saying, I'm going to go down there and, build some houses or whatever.
Well, there's a lot of things. So, I mean, overall, the population in West Virginia has decreased. So, yeah, that's going to affect the enrollment in every single school district, right? But then you also there's some other things that are taking public school kids out of public school that the state has been promoting. You've got the Hope Scholarship, which is drastically increasing in numbers and in costs. You've also got charter schools, which are becoming a lot more popular. And I think West Virginia has a couple now, and they even have like online charter schools. So that's taking kids out of the regular public school system and drawing them to the charters. And that is, again, decreasing enrollment and then decreasing the funding for school districts.
Got it. What is the Hope Scholarship for people who don't know? Like me, I don't know exactly
Right.
what that is.
So the Hope Scholarship is like a stipend program. Essentially, it is allowing, the way that it's being promoted is it's allowing like school choice. So say that you have a kid who maybe you don't like the public school system and you want them to go into a private school. There's certain like rules and regulations, but essentially it can help pay for a portion of your kid's private school. Like you get, I think right now it's just under $5,000 a year that if you apply for the Hope Scholarship and you're awarded it, your family for the single child gets about $5,000 a year to pay for either, it could be private school, it could be, homeschooling, something that's non-public. So it wouldn't technically, I don't think charter schools are public schools. It's just a different format.
And correct me so they're for profit, correct?
Yeah. I mean, obviously like private schools are.
So I think that's where the red flag comes up. It's like, you can't do both.
Right.
And you have a public school that's obviously heavily funded by the state.
Right.
How can you expect things to go well if you're trying to do both to where you fund these scholarships? What's the requirements for a scholarship?
I honestly don't know, but
I mean, didn't they take away the Promise Scholarship to pay for college for kids? They used to offer like if you got above a certain GPA,
right,
they would pay for your in-state tuition going to college.
I was not an in-state kid. I was from North Carolina, so I thought they still had the Promise Scholarship. Is it gone now?
I don't know. I never was in contention for it.
I know it helped. Like my husband had Promise Scholarship and helped pay for most of his undergrad.
Let's find out. So something like that, I'm okay with, and I'm not necessarily not.
It's a different pot of money. Right. It's a different. So like,
sure.
This is attracting kids out of the Hope Scholarship is attracting kids out of the public school system. And that's directly impacting the enrollment numbers, which then directly impacts the state aid that these districts receive.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a different.
Yeah. This is a different thing. I mean, it looks like the Promise Scholarship is still
I thought
going.
it was. Yeah.
So that's great. Get good grades, make your choices, go to trade school if you want.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm digressing here. But yeah, so basically to me, obviously that's a huge reason why a lot of these cuts are being made, and of course that's going to upset a lot of people because they're not funding the public school system, which every kid can go to.
Right. Well, it's like so it was brought up at one of the board meetings recently, but I feel like it's like a chicken and the egg situation. Like, what comes first? Are kids leaving because school systems they don't like them, and so they're leaving to go to Hope Scholarship, or are they leaving because the Hope Scholarship's taking them away, so they can't be funded properly, and so like it's just it's hard to say like to blame one thing or the other.
You can't do both.
Right. All you can really say is that state aid for sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
State aid for county school districts is based on enrollment. So when enrollment drops, the aid drops.
Yeah. Bless you.
Gosh.
Gotcha. Yeah, the Hope Scholarship's got its own website and everything. Who can participate? It says West Virginia students eligible to be enrolled in kindergarten for the 25th and 26th year.
Yeah. And they're about to open it up. So there was a restriction it related to private school kids. So it previously wasn't open to kids that were in the private school. They had to be in public schools. And so to like get around that rule, a lot of the kids were coming into the public schools. I think they had to be like public school kids for like 45 days.
Mm-hmm.
They were coming into public school, meeting that requirement and then leaving and going back to their private school.
Gotcha.
So there's a couple issues there that have kind of been discovered with the Hope Scholarship. But overall, so right now, the Hope Scholarship is costing the state around $50 million.
A year?
Yeah. But for the coming, so it's been it's been basically doubling every year. It's been around for like 3 or 4 years now. So it's $50 million for the current fiscal year, or school year, if you want to go that way. And then for the coming year, it's expected to be $100 million. So right now, the legislators are having to find a way to fund, like essentially find $50 million in their budget to allocate towards the Hope Scholarship.
Got it.
So that's being discussed. The governor is obviously a big advocate of it, and he's recommended a couple of sources already to be able to fully fund it.
So, question, how many counties is this realistically gonna help? Because to me, you know, counties like McDowell, counties like Clay, counties like, you know, pick any rural county.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not even really going to affect those counties, right? I mean, you mentioned how
What do you
online,
mean affect?
like who can legitimately go to a private school? Like,
But it's not just private schools. It can be online schools.
Well, yeah, but
So
with broadband being so awful, and you know, the thing that I'm scared of is the poor kids are going to be, you know, figured out, basically.
Well, I think so. There's been a lot of articles done by her name is Amelia Farrell Kinsley. I think she's I knew her before she was married, but
gotcha.
Different. She works for West Virginia Watch right now, and she's been covering this quite a lot. And she's written a couple stories about how there's no real oversight on how the Hope Scholarship money is spent. So she's mentioned that some of the money is people are using it to pay for like iPads. People have used it for like dance lessons. People have used it for like out of state homeschooling programs. So there's no real oversight on how the money is being spent. Obviously, I guess if you apply for it and say like you're going to be a homeschool kid and you don't maybe complete classes or you haven't applied for a program, I guess you could eventually be found out. But we're talking about thousands of students who are part of this program. That's a lot of oversight to have to do, as opposed to having these kids in a public school system that has the capacity to monitor what these kids are doing, their classes and things like that. So it's a lot, but I think, you know, like you mentioned, some of the smaller counties, you know, this might not be as popular to them. However, I did a story.
They can't even, truancy levels, I would say, are insane. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know like it's not really, it doesn't seem like it's pursued in a lot of counties.
Well, with homeschool, truancy, I mean, for public schools, yes. Like if you're not going to school, like they have dedicated staff that will, you know, they monitor that. But if you're homeschooled, you know, you're kind of out of the public eye. But I mean, there are counties in West Virginia where
bless you.
Oh my gosh.
We're leaving all that.
I know. Gosh, thanks. I was really sick. I wasn't baking. But there are counties in West Virginia where it takes like kids 2 hours on a bus to get to school. These are some really rural places. So like, you know, a Hope Scholarship for them would probably be really beneficial. It saves them 2 hours, but then you have, you know, you're at home. You don't have the interactions of like sports and friends and things like that. So, you know, yeah, it's an interesting take on.
These kids are getting weird with these iPads. I mean, they become like not human. I'm just saying. I mean, and I'm guilty of it too. You know, they love them, but Nora makes a lot of videos and stuff like that. Which she, you know, she ain't weirding out. But some kids are like, you know, but adults too. It's not just kids.
Weird,
yeah. Screens suck, except if you're watching this show.
You about to say,
but this is the informative show. Mm-hmm. Not and again, we don't do politics, but this stuff, like I have a daughter in the school system, like it really disturbs me when I hear about guidance counselors getting cut, because guidance counselors have been big in our life, big in my life. So can we get to some numbers here on what exactly happened?
Okay.
Have they made a definitive decision of like this many this many this?
So essentially where we're at the proposal stage. So the board meeting next Tuesday, April 8th at 5:30. It's actually going to be at Woodrow Wilson in the high school's auditorium. It's not going to be at the board office. It's going to be, I just got the agenda for it. And so it's Tuesday. It's at 5:30 at the Woodrow Wilson High School auditorium. And this will be when they definitively decide on the cuts.
Cool.
So right now, what they have before them is
and this is going to release Sunday. So it'll give you some time.
Yeah. So right now they're proposing 78 cuts for professional personnel and 67 transfers for professional personnel. So that's teachers or teachers or counselors or nurses and whoever that they get to keep their employment, but they're not going to stay in their current position. So they could be moving to a different school system. They could be, or not school system, but a different school, a different grade. They could be moving, any kind of transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's for the professional side, which is where the teachers mainly are. And then you've got one service personnel who's being proposed to be cut, and then 21 transfers on the service personnel side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot. That side is heavily decreased because there are already so many vacancies on the service personnel side. So they didn't have to do as many cuts to actual people. They just, I think, cut vacant positions.
Okay.
So
how many are getting... so what about, I had a bunch of guidance counselors message me that's like, I got fired. Here's my letter.
Yeah. So technically, they're not fired yet. The letter that they received says that essentially you are being recommended to be fired, which it's a weird.
That's a motivating 4 months.
Yeah.
Or 3 months, whatever.
Well, they get notified at the beginning of March, and then by April it gets decided, and then it doesn't take effect until the next school year. So yeah, they do. But it's a weird, because it's not like, so I mean, like when you think about like getting fired, typically it's like job performance or one of those things. But in this case, it's all based on numbers. So I think even in the letters, because I've read some of them, they all say like none of this is based on your performance. None of this is based on your conduct. It's all based on numbers. You have the least amount of seniority, or you're in a position that we have too many of, or we don't have funding for, and therefore you are being considered for layoff. You're being considered for transfer.
Right.
So that's essentially what the letters that they receive in March, and then they're all proposed. And then the school board, who are all elected officials, there's 5 members of the Raleigh County School Board. They're all elected. They will decide on whether or not to accept the cuts. So it's a really weird, the way that it happens at a board meeting, the personnel decisions are always at the very, very end of the meeting. So it starts out with like, I think it's like reports from the superintendent, and then public comment, and then regular business, like where they approve maybe bids, or they might have like a presentation from one of the district staff or something like that. And then at the very end is personnel cuts.
Got it.
You have to stay to the very, very end is when we'll know.
So could they potentially vote to not? So if they choose to keep everyone, can they afford it?
No. I think... So when this happened last year, there was significantly less cuts that were being proposed. I think there was around like 30 overall, I think professional and service, that were being recommended for cuts. And during that meeting when they were approving the cuts, it was a counselor, I think her name was Amber Cox. And a lot of people stood up for her and said, like, she is vital to our school system. We need her. Like, she has connected to her students and the staff. Like, she's vital to our school. Like, do not cut her. Mm-hmm. And right before they decided on the cuts, the board went into executive session and they removed her from the list and they voted on the rest. So the board can decide, honestly, whatever it wants. They can approve the cuts as they are being proposed. They can decide to remove some of the personnel from the list. They can decide to reject them altogether. I would say it's very, very unlikely that they will just reject all of them, again, because
can't afford it.
They can't afford it.
Yeah.
I think it is likely that changes could be made to accommodate some of the teachers and counselors that have been overwhelmingly advocated for. I mean, they had 2 days of hearings for these teachers who were getting cut, and the first one was 6 hours. The second day was 8-10 hours. So I mean, they've heard a lot from the teachers and counselors and staff members that are getting cut. They've heard a lot about, the importance that they play in the community and just kind of their role in the schools. So
what's the temperature like at these meetings? Are people overall angry, or are they kind of chill about it? What do you think? Because you've been to these.
Right. Well, it's always really interesting for me, having covered Board of Education, city council, things like that. I would say 90% of the meetings, they're not attended by anyone. They're attended by the district staff who has to go, and maybe one member of the media, and then some teachers who I think they have requirements for how many board meetings they have to go to. And that's it. So going into the board meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, where there was, I want to say there was at least 100 people there. That's not the normal, right? They're just not attended. And so seeing that many people, obviously they weren't there to talk about how great the school system was. Some people were there, they were giving out some awards, and there were people there for that, but the majority of people were there to tell the board members this is wrong, all these cuts that are being proposed, they're wrong, they're going to hurt the school system. So people were upset, they were angry, they were confused, because again, it is a confusing process if you're not in the middle of it. And I think,
and also we need to talk about the raise thing, because I think a lot of people are upset over that. So we have to bring it up.
Okay.
So Superintendent Starcher, was it a 4% raise that they voted in? You got the numbers here, but who all got raises and, with the board, and could that have possibly been held off?
So I don't know if the board members got raises. All those things had to be voted on. I don't think the board members got raises. I think that's, I don't know. I think the main raise that people were upset about was Dr. Starcher, Serena Starcher. She is the superintendent for Raleigh County Schools. So she was hired as the superintendent in, I want to say it was 22, 23 is when she was appointed. So superintendents, the way that it works is those positions are appointed by the school board. So the school board has a say in who is going to essentially lead the school district. It's up to them. Every other position is the superintendent. She or he recommends that position, and then the board approves it. But for superintendent, the school board has the say. So she had previously been the assistant superintendent for Raleigh County Schools for 15 years, I want to say. At least, I think, a decade or so. But she'd been here for a while. And so she was approved to be the superintendent about 2 years ago. They started her off on a $140,000 salary. And then they decided...
Get that bag.
So we'll
good.
compare that to other school districts in a second, but
and I think listen, I want to give this first off, full disclosure. Serena Starcher has called me several times this year to tell me about snow days. And I know that she's called y'all too, so I feel like I know her, okay? But really though, I hear she's a very nice person, very caring about the school system. The things that people are upset over is this raise issue.
Yeah.
And also, she doesn't live in the county is another thing that I'm hearing.
Okay.
But I don't even think that, I don't think there's any law that says you don't have to, or you have to live in the county. I know, me being from McDowell County, a lot of people that work for the board there, a lot of people that work for the school system drive from out of county to go into the school system.
So there is so when she was hired, there is a state code that says the superintendent has to either live in the county or an adjacent county. So when she was hired, she had to move to, I think, Mercer County, because it was stated that in her, like on her resume, it said that she lives in Bluefield, West Virginia. And that was actually one of the reasons why one of the board members voted against hiring her, is because she didn't live in Raleigh County. However, when she was hired, she told the board, like, I'll be moving to Mercer County. And that's following state statute that says you have to live in the county or an adjacent county.
Well, if she was in Bluefield, West Virginia, that's Mercer County.
Is it?
Yeah. Now there's a Bluefield, Virginia that's right
She was in
next to
Bluefield,
it.
Virginia.
Okay.
That was it.
Got it.
Yeah, she was in Bluefield, Virginia. So she did have to move. But again, so going back to like so when she started 2 years ago, she was at 140, and the previous superintendent, he was getting like 147, I think. So like it's consistent with what they were already paying the superintendent.
Sure, yeah. And I'm sure she's put a lot of effort into her career. I believe people should get paid. It's not that. And also, I don't even care about the county thing, because McDowell County for a long time had one of the best superintendents ever, Nelson Spencer. He didn't live in the county. I mean, he drove from out of county. So that's not an issue with me. I do think that it would have calmed the flame,
right?
If she could have foregone the raise, right?
So I will say, the reason that the raise was even brought up is because when she was hired, they gave her a 2-year contract. So her contract, it's going to be ending June 30th of this year. So they gave her a 2-year contract, and that's why in January there were negotiations for a new contract. And again, that's all done by the board. The board decides how much money she's going to make. The board decides how long her contract is going to be. So that's why it was brought up.
Okay.
Is because her contract was ending, and so they needed to be renewed. And so her new contract and her raise was approved in January. And again, this was the board's decision. They decided to give her a 3% raise, which would put her, so she was at 140 when she started, and then she got a raise as part of her initial contract. So she went up to 144.
That was before the cuts?
Yeah.
Okay. So the cuts, had they been notified that they were going to have to make cuts?
So the board approved her new contract for the coming year. They approved it in January.
Okay. So that's important to know that they did that before they were notified that they had to make cuts.
And again, I think, so I get the overall perception of getting a raise while proposing cuts. Her raise, it equates to about $4,000 for the coming school year.
Sure.
Also, if you look at other counties, it's very comparable to other counties. She's actually, Raleigh County Schools is, I think, the 6th or 7th highest enrollment overall for all the counties in West Virginia. We're 6th or 7th enrollment wise, and her salary, I think, falls into the 16th or 17th. So she's paid the same amount as the Fayette County superintendent, and Fayette County has about half the student population that we do. So they're at about 5,000. We have about 10,000 students. So if you just look at the numbers, her salary is comparable to what other superintendents are making across the state. I understand people's
well, you just look at it as oh, I see how it is. You're gonna step on the little guy, and you're gonna take care of you. I understand people's inclination to look at it like that, but man, this is a tough job.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because obviously like when this happened in January, nobody cared.
Mhm.
But obviously now we're in March. Now it's being brought up. But again, it goes back to like, there's a black and white way that the state requires school districts to go about, this RIF and transfer season. And it's a very personal situation.
Sure.
So I think that's where some of the frustration is because, so during these hearings, the board members did ask questions of, the personnel and things like that, but they're not really able to like express their opinions. So especially at the board meetings too, Larry Ford, who's the Raleigh County School Board president, he even said like, we cannot respond to what you're saying. And that's state code as well. It's part of the Open Meetings Act. They're not supposed to engage with people during public comment.
Man, I get fired so fast.
I know. Well, they can. So they can, during public meetings, they can ask questions of people that are speaking, but they can't give an opinion. They can't say, I agree with you. We shouldn't fire these teachers. They can't do that. So most times they just choose not to engage, period. So they don't break any state laws. So it's, again, like you have these kids. I mean, there were so many kids that spoke last meeting. You have like, there's like fifth grader who's like, please don't get rid of my school counselor. Please don't get rid of my art teacher. Like I really value her.
Oh.
And they're just sitting there listening and they can't really respond or interact. I think Snuffer, one of the board members, he was like, we're really impressed by all of you. Like, thank you for coming. But that was about it. That was about all the engagement that they were given.
Sure.
So I think that's where the frustration is like, these people are pouring their hearts out and they're, trying to defend their jobs. And you're just not getting much of a response from the administration because they really can't.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious what the compromise is here. I mean, what I hate about it, and I don't even know if this is true, but I feel like every county needs its own formula that's catered to its variables,
right?
Its broadband access, its number of, disabled children, its number of, all kinds of different things, test scores or whatever. All of these things, and they may be for each county, are they? Or is it just like, all right, blanket, here's the number?
Well, so again, like it's a standard formula, but like things like population density and there are some individualized factors that are, kind of mixed into the stated formula, but enrollment is one of the key factors that it's based on.
Did that formula just happen this year?
No. So I think it gets changed from time to time, but the stated formula has been around, I would say, for probably decades. It's the deciding factor for how they fund school systems. So, I mean, it gets changed from time to time, but, it's pretty standard how, I mean, and again, like it's up to the state to decide how they want to fund school systems. So like there was a bill in the legislature this session that could have actually saved all of the counselor jobs that were being proposed cut. I want to say, let me try to find it. It was House Bill 3209. So, and it was specifically related to school counselors and the number of counselors a school district needed to have per pupil. And so I guess the national standard that counseling agencies have come up with is that you need one counselor per every 250 students. So that was what was being proposed. And based on that, it would have saved all of the counselor jobs that were being cut, because with it was also going to come funding. So the state was going to say, you need this many counselors per students and we'll give you funding for that.
Right.
So that's another thing that plays in the state formula. So like if there are positions that the state has mandated, like you need this many positions per student, then they will give you funding for that. Mm-hmm. So like recently they increased the number of a specific aid that certain grade levels have to have. And so they say, okay, because we're making this requirement, which is going to increase your number of staff members, we'll give you funding for that.
Got it. Out of curiosity, I Googled what the total budget is for the public education system. And according to wvpolicy.org, it's $2.36 billion, which is 42% of the base budget. So this is interesting to me, and why I wanted to bring it up. It says during the 2021 and 2022 school year, public schools in West Virginia received 18.9% of funding from the federal government, totaling $779 million or $3,000 in federal funds per student. I'm wondering how $2.36 billion breaks down to each kid, because I wonder if that Hope Scholarship, is that around the same amount that they pay for each kid that's in the school system, or is it?
It's a little bit different. So like somewhat, again, it's been raised. I think for next year it's going to be over 5,000. And I think, if I can remember correctly, the school systems get about, I want to say it's a little over 5,000 per kid. But again, like,
which would be relative to this. According to this, it'd be about,
yeah,
I don't know, 7, 8.
But the school systems, again, like their state aid.
Bless you. Bless you.
They're like factored into that, or like multipliers and different factors. So like, it's not an exact, like if you get 5,000 for Hope Scholarship. Oh my.
Bless you. I'm leaving them all in. I'm sorry.
Water.
I'm sorry. Just the dedication, people. Jozy's been working on this on the front lines for. Do you need some water?
I think so.
We can get you some. Yeah. We can break. Here, I'll go get you one.
Yeah.
All right. And we're back. We have drinks. I got a raspberry black cherry flavored water. That's good. You all right?
Yeah, I'm gonna make it.
Okay, gonna make it.
Okay.
All right. So let's kind of divert here. So are there any specifics of your article that you want to explain thoroughly? I know we touched on a majority of things that I had questions about, but
I think what I really want to, well, so there's a couple of things that were brought up that, like the main outcry from the public were for a couple of things. So we mentioned Marvin Jarrell, who's a teacher at Independence Middle School, whose position is being cut. He'll retain his job, but he won't be at Independence Middle School, most likely, teaching advanced studies. There's also Shady Spring Elementary, Mark Campbell, the music teacher. His position is being cut. I didn't get to listen to his hearing. I don't know if he's going to get to, I don't know if he's being transferred or if he's being reduced in force. But from what was said at the meeting, the music program at Shady Spring is getting eliminated. And that was, people were extremely upset about that.
Yeah.
Again, it's the arts program.
This works out, you being choked up, because it sounds like you're about to start crying over that. So that's perfect timing.
And
I mean, it is sad.
No, yeah. And I mean, I'm a music kid. Like I did, I played the flute in middle school and high school. And, it was a big part of my life. I went to Marshall and I played in the marching band. I was a music minor.
No way.
Yeah.
That's like skills.
Yeah.
Wow.
Gave me a scholarship.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, music is, I think it's an important part of a lot of kids' education. It's been proven that, music helps stimulate, brain development and other aspects. It helps promote, variety of different skills. And that was brought up, like, you're eliminating this program that helps, kids in other aspects of their education.
Mental health.
Mm-hmm. The other one was for Ridgeview Elementary. Kimberly Sexton, she's an art teacher there. Again, I didn't listen to her. I wasn't able to listen to her hearing. So I don't know if she is getting cut or she's getting transferred, but the program, it seems like, is getting cut. It's another arts program, another elementary school. And then obviously the counselors, that was huge to know that many counselors are being cut. The other thing that was brought up was, which I'm surprised you haven't brought up, was the split classrooms.
Oh yeah, yeah. So combining grades, especially in elementary school.
Mm-hmm. So apparently, I did talk to a lot of my information that I did get was I did sit down with doctors. I didn't sit down, but I talked with her on the phone, and she talked to me a lot about the cuts that are being proposed, and I've talked with her in previous years about the same kind of thing, and she just laid out the numbers for me. She couldn't get into the specifics of, we're laying off or we're proposing to cut this many teachers because she said it's personnel and they can't get into like specifics, but obviously the specifics will be revealed when they vote on them. But, so I did talk to her a lot about this, and the split classrooms was one that I talked to her about because I didn't even know that we had them. And so I asked her, like, can you tell me how many split classrooms we're going to have next year? And she's like, well, I can't because technically a lot of that is based on what the board does. So if they approve all the cuts, then I can give you an idea. If they don't, so like nothing's been decided yet because the cuts haven't been approved.
And the problem with split classrooms is obviously in different grades, they'll be learning different things.
Right.
So it kind of breaks the flow of learning.
Right. It's also weird. So we currently already have split classrooms, apparently, I think in the elementary schools. And
bless you.
The reason for that is because, so the state mandates how many kids a teacher can teach per grade level. So what happens is, say, and I have it in my article, but essentially if like...
Yeah, and while you're looking there, people, you can go to creepalachia.tv and click on the stories tab. And I'm trying to bring up my mouse here. I can't. But it's running out of battery.
I think what I said, so for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, a teacher can have 25 pupils, and that's per state code. So what happens is, the example that I gave in my story was like, say you have 30 4th graders and 30 5th graders, right? Well, they can't all be in one class because it's over 25 kids, and the state's already said, nope, you can only have 25 kids per classroom for 4th grade. So essentially what happens is you have 5 extra kids in 4th grade and 5 extra kids in 5th grade that have to go somewhere, right? So you have 2 options. Well, you have a couple options. You can either hire 4 teachers to teach 2 classes of 4th grade and 2 classes of 5th grade, right? Or you can say, okay, we are going to combine some of the additional kids over the 25, combine them into one classroom, and we're going to have a split grade classroom. And that's why split grade classrooms are being proposed, is because there's a set number that they can teach. And when it's over, you have to figure out a way to teach those kids. And when you're receiving less money for teachers, combining students is the logical thing to do. It might not be the
preferred.
Right. A lot of the kids, there was actually a kid who spoke out that was like, this is not the way I want to learn. I don't think this is fair to me as a student to be in a split classroom. However, so it's not happening in Raleigh County yet, but in Kanawha County, what's happening is they were in the same kind of situation where their enrollment is dropping. So they've had to cut teachers. And instead of doing a split classroom, they're at the point where they're taking drastic measures and they're saying, okay, well, we don't have enough kids for this school, period. So we're just going to close this school. It sounds simple. It's not like there was a whole process. The board had to vote. It was a whole thing. But that's another scenario that other counties are going through when they're faced with dropping enrollment and faced with dropping state aid. They're choosing to consolidate schools. And so, we're not at that point, but if we continue to lose enrollment. So,
oh yeah, McDowell, we had, I don't know, I think 5 high schools. Yeah. Now it's down to 2.
Mm-hmm. So, because I think we're at, according to the official numbers the official numbers are drawn from the second month's enrollment, we're at like 10,287, I think. And I think a year ago we were at like 10,600. but we've like steadily been decreasing
Mm-hmm.
for quite some time. COVID kind of really skewed things, but even post-COVID, our numbers are dropping. And that's causing a lot of these personnel shifts and changes. But
yeah. Well, it's depressing.
yeah.
How do we close this? I know we're going to have another episode with a counselor and a teacher. Heather Arbogast and Melissa Long are going to be joining me and Jozy on the podcast later this month. I think it's after session's over.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be after the vote and after all the things to kind of work through this. But how do you give people some comfort?
I would say at this point, there is this. Sorry.
Oh, did I say bless you?
Choked up.
You're not sneezing.
No.
Can you say bless you when you cough?
I mean, it can't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I'm going to say it.
So, I think for my standpoint as someone that covers, these public meetings, I would say that like you still have an opportunity to have your voice heard. So the vote is happening on April 8th, 5:30, Woodrow Wilson High School. There will be the school board meeting, and you have the chance to speak directly to the board members who are going to make these decisions. So I would say anyone who is seeing this, is reading this, is feeling a certain way, go to the board meeting, speak up, sign up for public comment. I think you have to sign up at least 15 minutes in advance, so be there by 5.
Make offensive posters, hold them up, scream, shout.
Well, I mean, there's a decorum to uphold.
Right.
But
decorum.
still, I mean, like, I would say, like, go tell the board members how you feel. That is the whole point of a public meeting, is to tell people that you elect, how you think they should vote, why this affects you in a certain way, why you want to preserve the employment of a certain teacher or counselor or nurse or whoever, so that's what I would encourage people to do. And then beyond that, I would say, get engaged in the legislative process, because again, school systems are heavily regulated by the state. So if you want other changes that are, broad and more reaching and can potentially save jobs in the future, go talk to your legislators. I mean, they're in session right now. Call them, email them. That's what I would encourage people to do, is to, if don't just see this and be upset.
Throw a chair through the window. All that good stuff.
No, do something about it, because you can, and there is a lot of opportunities for you to do that.
Great answer, Jozy. I'm motivated now. I'm going to continue doing nothing. No, I'm kidding. We're going to talk about it and figure this out together, because it's important. Our children are literally our future. And regardless of regardless of what happens, it's going to be okay, people. We're going to teach these kids. We're going to find some app on their iPad that'll like teach them all kinds of stuff. And then we can do whatever else we want to do. And it'll be fine. It'll be good. But of course I'm kidding. But be sure to check out Jozy's article. It's called Raleigh County Schools Proposes 79 Staffing Cuts to Account for 250 Drop in Enrollment. And it is on our website, Creepalachia.TV, under the story section. Jozy is going to be doing regular stories with us into the foreseeable future until she gets tired of it, or whatever.
It's too ill to continue.
Yeah, too ill to continue. Well, you already got COVID, so you won't get COVID for a little while. You at least got the immunities going. But yeah, anything you want to plug? What's going on?
I mean, just read what I wrote. Please.
Yeah, please.
I worked really hard.
Please read what she wrote. It took you a month on it, all right? It took you about a month?
Weeks. Yeah, like 4,000 words. No, whatever.
Yeah, 4,000 words, whatever. Are you doing a second article?
Yeah, so I'm working now on the counselors, digging into more in kind of how that's going to affect the school system if the counselors do get cut that are being proposed for Raleigh County, and just kind of the legislation around counselors and things like that. So that's in the works right now, and hopefully that'll be out before.
Yeah. And I'm assuming we're going to release that on Creepalachia.tv. You can be so kind.
Stay tuned.
Well, cool. Yeah, stay tuned. We'll talk about that with Heather and Melissa. Everyone else, in the meantime, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Creepalachia if you haven't already. We have tons of cool things planned, but don't forget, we are on TikTok. We are on Facebook, a great following there. And everyone else, please remember, above all else, long live Appalachia.